They sang about loyalty, love, and small-town pride. But when the lights went down, their true colors showed. These weren't the humble country heroes fans thought they were. From onstage meltdowns and public insults to shocking displays of arrogance, some of Nashville's biggest names treated their fans like they didn't matter at all. Here are 12 country stars who betrayed the very people who made them famous. 1. Miranda Lambert, when the queen of country lost her cool. At the height of her fame, Miranda Lambert was celebrated as the fierce, no-nonsense queen of modern country. She built her brand on songs that spoke to heartbreak, resilience, and Southern pride, an unapologetic woman with a fire in her soul. Fans adored her for her honesty, the raw emotion in her lyrics, and the feeling that she was one of them, real, relatable, and tough enough to stand her ground. But in 2023, that image cracked wide open during one unforgettable night in Las Vegas. It happened at her residency show inside Planet Hollywood. As Miranda performed her ballad, Tin Man, a group of young fans near the stage decided to capture the moment with a selfie. What should have been a harmless snapshot turned into a viral controversy. Mid-song, Miranda abruptly stopped singing, glared at the crowd, and called them out. "These girls are worried about their selfie instead of listening to the song," she snapped into the microphone. The stunned audience fell silent. Some cheered her for sticking up for the music, but others immediately felt uncomfortable, embarrassed even, watching a star humiliate her own fans in public. Within hours, the video spread across social media like wildfire. The backlash was fierce. Many accused Lambert of arrogance and hypocrisy, pointing out that countless artists film themselves on stage all the time. Country radio hosts debated whether her reaction showed authenticity or ego. Former fans began sharing their own disappointing encounters. Stories of Miranda being dismissive during meet and greets, rolling her eyes at autograph requests, or rushing off without a word. For an artist whose songs once gave a voice to ordinary people, it felt like a betrayal. Behind the scenes, some industry insiders quietly admitted this wasn't a one-time outburst. Those who'd worked with her described a fiery temper and perfectionist streak that could turn hostile if things didn't go her way. In the fiercely loyal world of country music, where connection to fans is sacred, Miranda's moment of anger broke an unspoken bond. To her credit, Lambert later tried to move past the incident, doubling down on her commitment to respecting the music. But for many fans, the damage was done. They didn't see a passionate performer protecting her craft. They saw a superstar looking down on the people who helped her get there. For someone who once embodied the soul of modern country, Miranda's outburst became a cautionary tale. How quickly admiration can turn into resentment when an artist forgets who's really listening. 2. Jason Aldean, the arrogant outlaw who forgot his roots. Jason Aldean built his empire on an image of small-town grit and working-class pride, a man who rose from Georgia's dusty backroads to become one of country music's most dominant forces. His songs spoke about beer, freedom, and being real. Fans saw him as one of their own, a no-nonsense guy who never lost touch with his roots. But behind that rough-edged charm was a reputation that told a very different story. One that many of his own supporters would rather forget. For years, Aldean's attitude toward fans has been a point of contention. Meet and greet attendees have reported being brushed off with quick, cold handshakes and barely a word. Others describe him as detached and irritated, especially when fans made emotional comments about how his music changed their lives. One viral story involved a young woman who had traveled hundreds of miles to meet him after her father passed away. She claimed Aldean didn't even look up when she spoke. That moment shattered her admiration for the star she once saw as a hometown hero. On stage, Aldean's temper hasn't been much better. During several live shows, witnesses reported him cursing at concertgoers for shouting requests or for acting stupid. In one particularly infamous incident, he abruptly ended a show after a beer can was thrown toward the stage. A reasonable reaction for safety, perhaps, but the way he stormed off without a word left thousands of paying fans stunned. For a man who made millions singing about loyalty and good times, Aldean's treatment of his audience seemed laced with contempt. Critics say his arrogance only grew with his success. When controversy erupted over his song, "Try That in a Small Town," Aldean's online responses appeared defensive and dismissive, mocking those who disagreed. Instead of engaging with fans who felt disappointed, he doubled down with sarcasm, a move that made him look more like a bitter celebrity than a grounded country boy. Insiders describe him as someone who values control over connection. Tour staff have allegedly complained about his unwillingness to interact off stage, often retreating immediately after performances without saying a word to the crew or the crowd waiting outside. Still, Aldean's defenders argue that fame has made him weary, not cruel. But even if that's true, perception matters. And in the heart of country music, where humility is everything, arrogance is the ultimate sin. Jason Aldean may still fill stadiums, but the quiet disillusionment among his oldest fans tells another story. Sometimes the loudest voice in the room is also the one that stopped listening long ago. Bạn có muốn tôi viết tiếp nhân vật thứ ba, Blake Shelton? 400 bị từ không? 3. Blake Shelton, from America's sweetheart to country's most insufferable star. For more than a decade, Blake Shelton was seen as country music's friendly giant, the witty Oklahoma boy with a golden voice and a down-home charm that even pop audiences adored. As a longtime judge on The Voice, he became one of the genre's biggest ambassadors, blending humor with heart. But as his fame skyrocketed, something changed. The Blake, who once came across as humble and relatable, began to show a darker, more arrogant edge, especially when it came to the fans who made him famous. It started quietly on social media. Shelton's Twitter account, once full of jokes and playful banter, turned sour. He began mocking fans who criticized his music, telling one follower to shut up and buy a ticket if you don't like it, and labeling others morons and idiots. What had once been an easygoing charm now read as bitterness. When journalists questioned his tone, Shelton doubled down, insisting that he was just being real. But for fans who'd admired his authenticity, his defensiveness came off as insecurity wrapped in ego. Then came the live shows. Concertgoers began reporting incidents of Shelton showing up late, visibly drunk, or rushing through songs with little energy. Some fans said he barely acknowledged the crowd, choosing instead to talk about himself or joke with the band. In smaller venues, his occasional outbursts made headlines, from snapping at hecklers to making crude jokes at fans' expense. For an artist who'd built his image around being everybody's buddy, the disconnect was hard to ignore. Behind the scenes, tour staff and industry insiders painted an even bleaker picture. Multiple reports described a man who was becoming increasingly difficult to work with, aloof, sarcastic, and dismissive of those around him. Some attributed his behavior to burnout. Others simply called it arrogance born from too much success. The breaking point for many longtime fans came during his post-divorce period and subsequent romance with Gwen Stefani. While tabloids obsessed over the relationship, Shelton's public persona shifted completely. He began embracing a Hollywood lifestyle, appearing in glossy magazines, and promoting himself as a celebrity first, country artist second. Fans felt abandoned, as if the man who once represented small-town authenticity had traded his cowboy boots for designer shoes and forgot the people still living in the world he used to sing about. In interviews, Blake has shrugged off the criticism, claiming he doesn't care what people think. But the truth is, country fans do. In a genre built on connection, humility, and shared values, Shelton's transformation from humble star to entitled celebrity became a sobering reminder. Fame doesn't just change your life, it can erase your roots. 4. LeAnn Rimes, the fall of country's golden girl. When LeAnn Rimes burst onto the country scene as a teenager, she was hailed as the next Patsy Cline, a once-in-a-generation voice wrapped in innocence and promise. Her breakout hit Blue turned her into America's sweetheart almost overnight. She was young, polite, and filled with that Southern charm that made people believe she'd stay humble forever. But as the years went on, fame, scandal, and bitterness transformed LeAnn from a beloved prodigy into one of Nashville's most polarizing figures, especially when it came to how she treated her fans. The turning point came in 2009, when news broke of her affair with actor Eddie Cibrian. The story dominated tabloids for months, painting her as the homewrecker who destroyed 2 marriages. While personal lives are complicated, LeAnn's reaction to the public backlash only made things worse. Instead of staying quiet, she took to Twitter, attacking fans who criticized her choices. Anyone who questioned her morality was met with snarky, passive-aggressive replies or outright insults. Longtime supporters, many of whom had defended her since she was a child star, suddenly found themselves being blocked, mocked, or dismissed. Her live shows also began to reflect the tension. Fans reported moments of LeAnn appearing distracted or emotional on stage, sometimes cutting songs short or ranting about people judging her life. Some even described her as cold or uninterested during meet and greets, smiling for photos but offering little warmth. The once genuine connection she had with her audience seemed to vanish, replaced by defensiveness and resentment. In 2012, Rimes entered rehab for anxiety and stress, admitting she was overwhelmed by public criticism. While many sympathized, her combative tone didn't fade afterward. She continued to tweet bitter remarks toward fans and fellow artists, often reigniting old controversies. Instead of focusing on music, she seemed locked in a cycle of anger and self-justification, and the fans she lashed out at were the collateral damage. Behind closed doors, some insiders described LeAnn as deeply insecure, haunted by the feeling that Nashville never fully accepted her after her early success. That pain, they said, sometimes turned into hostility, a defense mechanism that alienated even her most loyal listeners. To her credit, Rimes has since tried to rebuild her image through openness about mental health and forgiveness. But the scars remain. For many fans, the transformation of that bright, barefoot girl who sang Blue into a celebrity who bites back was heartbreaking to watch. In country music, humility and grace are sacred. And LeAnn Rimes says, "Story became a cautionary tale of what happens when fame's glare turns warmth into resentment." 5. Toby Keith, the patriot whose pride went too far. Few names in country music command as much recognition as Toby Keith. With his booming voice, unapologetic patriotism, and anthems like Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, he became the post-9/11 face of American pride. Fans adored him as the tough-talking, beer-drinking cowboy who stood up for the troops and for the working class. But as his fame grew, so did his ego. And soon, that same pride that fueled his success began to alienate the very people who had once cheered him on. Keith's reputation for arrogance has long been whispered about behind the scenes. Tour staff and industry insiders describe him as stubborn, quick-tempered, and dismissive toward anyone he deems unworthy of his time. For years, fans overlooked that attitude, chalking it up to his bold personality. But as the stories piled up, a pattern emerged. One that painted Toby Keith as less of a patriotic hero and more of a man who didn't know when to back down. In one infamous concert incident, a fan tossed a small American flag toward the stage, a gesture meant as appreciation. Instead of thanking them, Keith reportedly sneered, kicked the flag aside, and barked something about people needing to show respect. The moment stunned the crowd. Videos of his outburst circulated online, and fans debated whether it was righteous anger or sheer arrogance. There were other controversies, too. Keith has publicly insulted journalists who questioned his lyrics, often dismissing them as un-American. During interviews, his tone could be combative, even condescending, as if any form of disagreement was a personal attack. Some radio hosts quietly admitted they stopped inviting him because you never knew which Toby you'd get, the entertainer or the bully. His fan interactions didn't fare much better. Meet and greet attendees have described him as cold, rarely offering more than a curt nod or a forced smile. For someone who built his empire on celebrating the common man, that kind of indifference hit especially hard. Yet perhaps the saddest part of Toby Keith's story is that his music still connects with millions, but his attitude often overshadows it. Many of his oldest supporters continue to defend him, insisting he's just misunderstood or fiercely protective of his beliefs. But others quietly drifted away, tired of watching their hero lash out at the world. In the end, Toby Keith's story isn't just about fame. It's about pride, the kind that builds a legend and, when left unchecked, drives fans away. For a man who sang about unity, his greatest divide may have been the one he created between himself and the people who once called him their voice. 6. Hank Williams Jr., the outlaw who took it too far. Hank Williams Jr. was born into country royalty. As the son of the legendary Hank Williams Sr., he carried both the gift and the burden of one of music's greatest legacies. When he found his own voice in the 1970s, fans embraced him as a rebel, loud, unapologetic, and fiercely independent. Songs like A Country Boy Can Survive and Family Tradition turned him into the symbol of Southern defiance. But over the years, that outlaw spirit morphed into something darker: arrogance, temper, and open disdain for the very people who made him a legend. For decades, Hank Jr. has been known for unpredictable behavior on and off the stage. Fans once loved his wildness, the whiskey, the attitude, the middle finger to Nashville's polished image. But those same traits eventually began to backfire. Stories spread of him cursing out fans who dared to shout requests during concerts or storming off stage mid-song if he didn't like the crowd's energy. At one outdoor show in the early 2000s, witnesses claimed he insulted a group of fans for not knowing real country music before cutting the set short and disappearing backstage. The pattern didn't stop there. Hank's temper often spilled over into his public appearances. He made national headlines in 2011 after comparing President Obama to Hitler during a Fox News interview, a remark that cost him his long-running Monday Night Football theme deal. Instead of apologizing, Hank doubled down, blasting critics and mocking anyone who disagreed. Many longtime fans, even those who loved his rebellious streak, felt betrayed. The outlaw had turned into a bitter old man shouting at his own audience. Backstage accounts describe him as equally volatile. Crew members have spoken about being berated or fired on the spot for minor mistakes. Meet and greet sessions, once cherished by fans, became tense affairs. Short, uncomfortable, and often cut off early. Some fans even joke that Hank Jr. hates people, but behind the humor was real disappointment. There's no denying Hank Williams Jr. is a country icon, a bridge between old-school grit and modern rebellion. But his legacy is complicated. His refusal to filter himself once made him a hero of authenticity. Now, it feels like a shield for cruelty. The line between outlaw and jerk is thin, and Hank crossed it more than once. For fans who grew up idolizing him, the hardest truth to swallow isn't his politics or his temper. It's realizing that their hero never really cared what they thought. In the end, the rebel who sang about surviving forgot one simple truth. It's the people who bought the tickets that keep a country boy alive. 7. Faith Hill, the queen who lost her grace. Faith Hill was once the embodiment of elegance in country music. A powerhouse vocalist with the charm of a Southern belle and the warmth of someone who never forgot her roots. Songs like Breathe and This Kiss made her a household name, and when she married fellow superstar Tim McGraw, they became Nashville's royal couple. Fans adored her as both a performer and a person, graceful, classy, and grateful. But behind the perfect image, Faith had moments where her composure cracked, and her temper, especially toward fans, made headlines that still haunt her career. The most infamous incident happened in 2007 during a Tim McGraw concert in Lafayette, Louisiana. As Faith watched from the side of the stage, a female fan in the front row reached up and grabbed Tim's lower body during a performance. In seconds, Faith stormed onto the stage, furious. "Somebody needs to teach you some class, lady," she shouted, pointing directly at the fan as cameras rolled. The crowd roared in confusion, some cheering her for defending her husband, others stunned at her outburst. The clip went viral, with media outlets replaying it for weeks. While some applauded her passion, others saw something else: a diva who publicly humiliated a fan. Commentators questioned whether Faith could have handled the situation privately, or at least with more restraint. Instead, the moment became a defining example of how fast admiration can turn to discomfort when an artist loses control in front of their audience. That wasn't the only time fans felt Faith's sharp edge. During meet and greets, several accounts surfaced of her being distant or impatient. One longtime fan shared online that she waited in line for hours only for Faith to give a forced smile, sign a photo, and turn away without a word. "I still love her music," the fan wrote, "but that moment broke something for me." Insiders have often described Hill as highly disciplined, someone who demands perfection not just from herself, but from everyone around her. It's that same drive that made her a superstar, yet it's also what sometimes made her seem cold or unapproachable. After the Lafayette incident, she remained quiet about it for years, never issuing an apology, never addressing the backlash. To this day, Faith Hill's name still carries immense respect. But for some fans, the image of her pointing and yelling from that stage lingers like a crack in a porcelain figure, a brief, raw glimpse of a legend losing her grace. In country music, passion and poise go hand in hand, and that night, Faith Hill showed the world just how easily one can overpower the other. 8. Gretchen Wilson, the rebel who couldn't control herself. When Gretchen Wilson burst onto the country scene in 2004 with her smash hit Redneck Woman, she was hailed as a breath of fresh air, raw, fearless, and unapologetically blue-collar. She was the voice of everyday women who drank beer from the bottle and weren't afraid to speak their minds. Her rise was meteoric, her attitude magnetic. But as the years went on, that same fire that made her famous became her undoing. Behind the rebel image was a star who couldn't seem to separate authenticity from self-destruction, and her fans often paid the price. Wilson's reputation for volatility started early in her career. What began as spirited defiance evolved into unprofessional behavior and frequent outbursts. Fans who attended her concerts began sharing troubling stories. Shows starting hours late, sets cut short without explanation, and slurred performances that left audiences disappointed. At a 2013 county fair concert, Gretchen allegedly appeared intoxicated, stumbling through lyrics and snapping at fans who booed. "If you don't like it," she shouted, "you can leave." Some did, walking away heartbroken from the singer who once represented them. Her problems didn't stop there. Wilson's backstage behavior became infamous across the touring circuit. In 2018, she was arrested at a Connecticut airport after getting into a confrontation with another passenger, reportedly over a bathroom line. The headlines were humiliating, but what shocked fans most was her response. No remorse, just irritation that anyone cared. In interviews afterward, she brushed off the incident as no big deal, further fueling the perception that fame had hardened her. Even meet and greets, where fans hoped to connect with the down-to-earth woman from her lyrics, turned tense. Multiple attendees have described Wilson as cold or visibly annoyed. One fan recalled driving 6 hours only to get a rushed autograph and a dismissive glance. "She didn't even look at me," the fan said. "I thought she'd be just like her songs. Tough but kind." She wasn't. Insiders suggest that Wilson struggled with the pressures of fame and an industry that tried to polish her rough edges. But while many country stars fight for authenticity, Gretchen's defiance often came at the expense of professionalism. Her unapologetic persona, once empowering, began to look like arrogance. To this day, Gretchen Wilson remains a polarizing figure, a talented woman whose pride and temper often overshadow her music. She reminded fans that being real doesn't mean being rude, and that rebellion without respect eventually stops being inspiring and starts being exhausting. 9. Billy Currington, the nice guy who snapped for years. Billy Currington was one of Nashville's most likable figures, the laid-back Georgia boy with a surfer's smile and a voice that melted hearts. His songs like Good Directions and People Are Crazy captured an easy, carefree spirit. He seemed humble, grateful, and genuine, the kind of guy fans could have a beer with after the show. But beneath that charming exterior, there was a darker side that shocked everyone when it finally surfaced. The man who built his image on good vibes and sunshine ended up exposing a temper few believed existed. In 2013, Currington was arrested after an ugly altercation in Tybee Island, Georgia. According to reports, he lost his temper at a boat captain who'd brought tourists too close to his private dock. What began as yelling escalated into threats, and the situation got so out of hand that authorities charged him with terroristic threats and abuse of an elderly person. The story hit the headlines like a thunderclap. Fans who'd sung along to his feel-good anthems suddenly saw a mugshot of their hero looking anything but calm. Though the charges were eventually reduced, the damage to his image was severe. During the following tours, fans described him as cold and withdrawn, a far cry from the warm performer they once adored. Meet and greet sessions that used to be filled with laughter became stiff and mechanical. "He didn't smile once," one fan wrote after a show. "He just signed the picture, said thanks, and looked past me like I wasn't there." There were also whispers in the industry about Currington's increasingly difficult behavior behind the scenes, short tempers during rehearsals, angry outbursts over small details, and a general sense that fame had made him intolerant of mistakes. To some, it seemed like he was still haunted by the embarrassment of his arrest. To others, It was proof that the good guy image had never been real. Currington tried to rebuild his reputation quietly, releasing new music and avoiding controversy, but fan enthusiasm never quite returned to what it once was. The laid-back charm that once defined him now felt forced, and audiences seemed hesitant to trust him again. In country music, where humility and kindness are almost sacred virtues, Currington's fall from grace was a painful reminder of how fragile an artist's bond with fans can be. The man who once sang about life's simple joys became a symbol of how quickly anger can destroy even the easiest kind of love. Sometimes, it only takes one bad day to turn a hero into a headline. And for Billy Currington, that day changed everything. 10. Brantley Gilbert, the tough guy who pushed too far. Brantley Gilbert built his brand on being country music's resident bad boy, the tattooed outlaw with a heart of gold. His songs like Bottoms Up and You Don't Know Her Like I Do gave him a dual image, rugged on the outside, emotional on the inside. Fans loved that balance, a guy's guy who still believed in loyalty, love, and small-town roots. But as fame amplified his swagger, Gilbert's rough edges started cutting deeper, and that tough guy charm began to look more like arrogance. Fans who met him during the early years remember a friendly, approachable man who'd take time to chat, pose for photos, and thank everyone for their support. But by the mid-2010s, that reputation had started to crumble. Reports began surfacing from meet-and-greet attendees describing him as cold and uninterested. Some said he barely made eye contact. Others claimed he looked visibly annoyed to be there. "It felt like I was bothering him," one fan posted online. "I waited all day just to meet the guy who changed my life with his music, and he didn't even smile." At concerts, his fiery stage presence, once electrifying, sometimes turned hostile. In one viral clip, Gilbert stopped mid-song to scold a fan for throwing a drink, shouting, "You don't come to my show and disrespect me." The crowd cheered at first, but as he kept going, the tone shifted. He wasn't joking or laughing it off. He was angry, pacing the stage, pointing into the crowd. It was a moment that made many fans uncomfortable. Insiders from his touring crew have painted a similar picture. They describe him as fiercely controlling, quick to lose patience when things don't go his way, and obsessed with maintaining his tough image. While that persona helped him stand out in an industry of polished stars, it also made him seem unapproachable, even ungrateful, to those who'd once been his biggest supporters. Social media didn't help either. Gilbert often clapped back at critics online, responding to harmless jokes or complaints with sarcasm or thinly veiled aggression. For someone who prided himself on being real, his responses often came across as petty. "I don't owe anybody anything," he once told a reporter, a line that stuck with fans who remembered when he used to say the opposite. Despite the criticism, Brantley Gilbert remains a talented performer with loyal followers who love his authenticity. But for many others, the man who once represented strength and sincerity now feels like another Nashville star who let ego outshine empathy. In trying so hard to prove he's not fake, Gilbert ended up alienating the very people who once believed he was the realest of them all. 11. Kellie Pickler, the small-town girl who forgot her heart. When Kellie Pickler first appeared on American Idol in 2006, America fell in love with her. She was the small-town waitress with the thick accent, the sweet laugh, and the innocent charm that felt completely genuine. She wasn't polished, but that was exactly why fans adored her. Every step of her journey, from singing barefoot on stage to winning CMA Female Vocalist of the Year, felt like a fairy tale. She was the living proof that authenticity could still make it in Nashville. But as her fame grew, the star who once radiated warmth began to harden, and fans started to see a side of Kellie Pickler they didn't recognize. The first cracks appeared during her post-Idol tours. Fans who'd waited hours to meet her described her as rushed, distant, and uninterested. She looked bored, one fan recalled. "I told her how much her songs helped me through hard times, and she just smiled for the camera and turned away." For many, it was a painful realization. The same woman who'd once seemed so grateful for every supporter now acted like meeting them was an inconvenience. As her television fame expanded, from Dancing with the Stars to her own reality show I Love Kellie Pickler, her persona shifted from humble to high maintenance. Behind the bubbly laughter, insiders described someone increasingly impatient and demanding. Crew members from her show later hinted that Kellie could be difficult to work with, prone to mood swings, quick to snap at producers, and rarely in the mood to engage with fans on set. At concerts, that tension sometimes bled into her performances. Reports emerged of Pickler cutting shows short, complaining about the venue, or refusing encore requests. One particularly awkward moment came during a fan Q&A session when she mocked a fan's accent, the very kind of accent she once proudly represented. The clip spread quickly online, and longtime fans were crushed. "She used to be one of us," one commenter wrote. "Now she sounds like she's laughing at us." Some have defended Pickler, saying that fame simply took a toll on her mental health and privacy. Indeed, life in the spotlight can be brutal, especially for someone who rose from nothing. But others argue that humility shouldn't disappear just because success arrives. Today, Kellie Pickler's public appearances are fewer, and her reputation, while not ruined, carries a quiet unease. To her most loyal fans, she'll always be that barefoot girl singing her heart out. But to those who met her later, she's a reminder of how fame can dull even the brightest spark. In country music, where kindness is currency, Kellie Pickler's story is a sobering lesson in what happens when a small-town heart gets lost in the glare of big city lights. 12. Travis Tritt, the legend who let his ego do the talking. In the 1990s, Travis Tritt was one of country music's biggest names, a powerhouse vocalist who blended outlaw attitude with Southern soul. With hits like "It's a Great Day to Be Alive" and "Here's a Quarter, Call Someone Who Can Hair," he carved out a niche as the rebel who refused to bow to Nashville's rules. Fans loved his grit, his honesty, and his refusal to conform. But somewhere along the way, that confidence curdled into arrogance, and the rebel spirit that once inspired millions began to alienate the very people who had built him up. Tritt's relationship with fans has long been complicated. He's never been one to mince words, a quality that, early in his career, made him seem refreshingly authentic. But in later years, it became something else entirely: combative, dismissive, and sometimes downright cruel. At multiple concerts, Tritt was reported to have scolded audience members for talking or shouting requests, sometimes halting the show to lecture them about respect. At a 2019 performance in Kentucky, one fan claimed he stopped mid-song, pointed at a group in the front row, and ordered security to get them out for being too loud. The irony, of course, was that country music fans had once loved him for being loud and wild himself. Offstage, Tritt's outspoken personality only deepened the divide. On social media, he became notorious for his rants, calling out critics, fans, and even fellow musicians with a venom that shocked many. He publicly mocked fans who disagreed with him politically, telling one commenter to go listen to somebody else if they didn't like his views. For a genre rooted in unity and community, his divisiveness felt like betrayal. Behind the scenes, those who've worked with Tritt describe him as demanding and prone to mood swings. Crew members have told stories of being berated for minor mistakes or ignored entirely. Meet and greet attendees have reported cold stares and half-hearted handshakes. "It's like he's tired of people," one fan said after waiting hours to see him. "He doesn't realize we're the reason he's still here." There's no denying Travis Tritt's talent or his place in country history. He helped define the sound of a generation and inspired countless artists. But his inability to temper pride with gratitude has left scars that even great music can't hide. In interviews, he insists he's just being real, but humility isn't weakness, and arrogance isn't authenticity. In the end, Travis Tritt's story mirrors a truth as old as country music itself. Fame tests character. And for a man who once sang that it was a great day to be alive, too many fans walked away feeling like it wasn't so great to be his fan anymore.